welcome to the Car Passion channel. Today, we will be changing a head gasket. Again. What happened? Okay, let's just get to work already. Alright, I need to give you guys a 30-second briefing on what happened in the last video for anyone who didn't see it, because that information is relevant to why this video exists. In a nutshell, the VVT Beast had a head gasket leak, possibly due to the head warping, but it's hard to say for sure. At any rate, it was allowing water to get into cylinder number 2 and 3, as well as pressurizing the cooling system. The water in the cylinders did cause some minor corrosion, but I decided to just send it, have the head resurfaced, and threw it back together with an extra Cometic MLS head gasket that I had laying around. Everything ran perfect except under high loads of around 18 psi or more, the engine would make a bad noise. I assumed it was some sort of detonation, even though I had never heard such a sound before, but after uploading the video, a couple people pointed out that it could be the pistons hitting the head, which based on what you're about to see, makes a lot more sense. But first, the head needs to come off. It's 11:30 a.m. and it's time for another head pull speed run. Alright boys, that would be 63 minutes, including a short break of 5 minutes or so. And what do we have here? A Miat. The head is ready to be removed. So we're kind of halfway done-ish, even though the reassembly definitely takes longer and is a little bit more difficult. But anyways, let's get this head off. Now I know in the last video, my leading theory for what this mysterious noise was some kind of detonation. And I sort of didn't think it was correct just because it was so loud and something that I hadn't heard before, but I couldn't really think of anything else that it could be. But a couple people brought to my attention that that sound is most likely the pistons hitting the head. I rotated the engine by hand, totally fine. Fired it up, idled, fine. Drove it, fine. Could take it even all the way to red line, completely fine, all the way up to operating temperature where the rods should be getting very slightly longer due to the expansion of the metals, and nothing was contacting except when I got into a lot of boost. 10 pounds of boost, fine. 18 to 20 pounds of boost, and that noise would happen. What was told to me, and makes perfect sense now, is that I've covered this in a Okay, my microphone died. Let's try that again. So I've covered in a previous video what is called the thrust side of the cylinder. When the intake charge goes off or ignites, it loads the piston up to one side. So on one side of the cylinder, you'll have a little bit more wear, especially on a higher powered engine, or that wear band will be a little bit wider on one side of the cylinder than the other. And that's because the piston is being rocked to one side with a lot of power. So if that piston rocks enough, it now has a high side and a low side. So the high side could be contacting the head only under a lot of boost. And when I put this head gasket in initially, the one that I just had laying around, the only thing I was thinking about is piston to valve clearance, because this engine has really tight piston to valve clearance, but I knew I cut the pistons enough so that if I had to shave the head or change the head gasket someday, I'd have a little bit of wiggle room to where I wouldn't really have to worry about it. But what I didn't think about as much is this engine had a really tight squish clearance already, 31 thousandths, which is basically the minimum you ever want, and I've reduced it now to about 20 thousandths with that new head gasket. I know, like, okay, 30 thousandths to 20 thousandths doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but it's over a 30% reduction, and here's what that looks like visually. This is 31 thousandths, tip of this, the tip of these calipers right here, and that is 20 thousandths. So this is how close the pistons are getting to the cylinder head, just cold, rotating by hand, without a lot of torque, without all the parts moving. So it's still just a theory at this point, but I made that thing happen 3 or 4 times before I was like, okay, I should probably take it easy and stop trying to solve this problem by hurting my engine. But I'll be able to confirm that theory right now when I pull the cylinder head off, because I'm positive at 20 pounds of boost and the speed those pistons are going and the sound that they were making, there has got to be some kind of marking on the piston or the head where that was happening. Hopefully it's not damaged too bad, but the engine's been running fine. I've been driving the car to work, no problem, just less boost obviously. So anyways, I'm gonna pull the head off now and inspect it and see what we find. Oh yeah. Okay, the head gasket is still on here. That's actually copper spray, not rust this time, for once. But the reason I left the gasket on is because it makes it really easy to see in what area the pistons can protrude into or towards the combustion chamber. And what I'm finding pretty interesting is this area right here between the head gasket and the edge of the combustion chamber. You can see this turns into like the bowl right here. This is the part that the pistons would be contacting if there was an issue. Now, you'll notice on a lot of that area, it's completely covered with burnt carbon. But in some of the areas, and I haven't cleaned this at all, it's still like the machine shop. It's like fresh from the machine shop. This is actually not fully carboned out the way that some of the other areas are. The edge right here, pretty clean compared to this side, which is completely covered in carbon. These as well have like a little clean area, especially that one. Look how clean that is right next to the head gasket, right in that area right there where that silver is showing, compared to this side. So what I would guess just by looking at this head, now I can't see any damage. I'm gonna pull the head gasket off and check the area between where the piston edge would be and the head. I would guess that the pistons rock away from the intake side, which makes sense, as in the intake side where the charge comes in, the piston is being pushed down harder on this side, so this would be the low side of the piston, and this would be the high side, making this side of the piston get closer to the head. So even if it's not contacting, it's getting so close that combustion is not even able to happen in that little area. Now, if I pull the gasket off, now I've wiped off the area of the head where I believe the piston was getting the closest. I think that little ring right there is actually a tiny, tiny groove from the previous head gasket, the cut ring gasket, that just wasn't machined all the way by the machine shop, but that's not really a big deal, I don't think. But it does not look like there's any damage. It's like completely flat. Just taking a close look, it definitely doesn't look like there was any contact. So looks like I got extremely lucky, and that the sound may have been, I don't know, it could have been combustion happening in the squish area. Not really too sure. So the pistons look like they're telling the same story as the head. As you can see, that is the exhaust side. That's the intake side. So I would guess that there was more room for combustion on the intake side because the piston was rocking downwards on this side. So if you could imagine the piston tilting this direction, not that extreme obviously, but it opened up that gap a little bit more so combustion could happen on that side. And then the exhaust side is so tight to the head that it's pretty much completely clean. But the good news is it looks like there is zero damage. It looks like there was actually no contact. And I got a few comments asking, well, how's it even possible that the pistons could hit the head if they're like inside the block? But if you recall from my build video, for anyone who saw it, the pistons on this engine actually protrude out of the block. So if I crank this over to top dead center, you can see that they are just barely peeking above the block deck. So they protrude into the head gasket area and get very close to the head, obviously. All right, so everything's actually looking really good. I have not been able to find any damage. It all looks healthy, which means I should be able to put in the new 60 thousandths head gasket and just be able to crank this thing back up to 500 tonight or tomorrow. That's actually gonna bring the squish up higher than it was before on the original setup, and that should be good for all cases. So right now I'm gonna get the block surface cleaned up, the head surface cleaned up, and put this thing back together after some lunch. Did someone say lunch? And what did you do to deserve lunch today, Craig? Video games. What do you want for lunch? Hamburgers. Tacos it is. Let's go. So I cleaned the head, and I think I just found where the pistons were hitting. Not where I expected, to be honest, but there's a little sliver of head between the cylinders that the piston actually does get close to as well. It's not as big as this area right here. There's still a little stuff on there. But if you look closely, you can see there's a little band where the aluminum is a bit of a different color, bit of a different texture as well. You can see it's kind of like a stripe. See if I adjust these settings here, if you can see it better. There we go. Just the tiniest little, that's like less than 1 millimeter. And if we come over to that was cylinder number 2, backside. Check out this piston in the same area. Look at that little gray band right there. Very slightly different texture. I would guess that is where the contact was happening. And it was happening as well on 2 of the other cylinders, but this was the thickest band, so definitely the worst contact right there. But the good news is it doesn't look damaged. You can just see the witness mark basically from where that thing was contacting the head. So I think the mystery's pretty much solved on that, which is good, I'd say. Good outcome. But yeah, you could see cylinder number 1, same thing. I know it's like really hard to see. Maybe I'll take a photo and put it on screen so you can see it better. And then back on cylinder number 4, that's really distinct there. You can see the edge just barely nicking that thing. But the problem should be solved with the thicker head gasket, as I said. So let's get this thing back together. So I did forget to film the time on my phone in the beginning of this, but I can tell from the timestamps on my camera clips that from this clip to the clip where I actually started the car, they were filmed 1 hour and 37 minutes apart. So just over 2.5 hours for a complete head gasket change. Not too bad, but I really hope I don't have to do another one again soon. Okay, moment of truth. Time to see what I forgot this time. Fired up like normal, sounds good. Except for the massive fuel leak. Shoot. One of the freaking fuel hoses split. The one time I don't do the thing where I prime the fuel system and check for leaks before firing the car, there's a fuel leak. In my mind, I was like, you know what? There's never a fuel leak. I don't really need to do it this time. But anyways, that's a good demonstration of just how much fuel that fuel pump can move, because there is a huge puddle under the car. Luckily, no fire, but that's why you always keep a fire extinguisher handy whenever you're working on your car, because you just never know. So there's the fuel line. As you can see, it's like weather rotted, weather cracked. This stuff's probably, I don't know, a year old, maybe? Here's the brand Armor mark. So avoid this stuff at all costs. I have some other fuel hose on the car that's a different brand that is much older and it looks brand new. I will go get some fuel line tonight, replace it tomorrow morning, and test drive the car at full power, full send. I will see you in just a second. Well, everything looks and sounds healthy. The only thing left is to go for a test drive. But first, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the Car Passion channel patrons. It's because of your guys' support that I'm able to put more time and more effort into these videos, buy more parts for research and development on our beloved Miata chassis, and keep Craig's hamburger habit at bay. Anyways, your names are on screen right now, and if you'd like more details on how to become a Car Passion Channel patron, you can find those in the description below. Thank you guys again so much for your support, and now back to the test drive. Here goes nothing. See my boost by gear targets right there. 4th and 5th, full power, right around 23.5 PSI, which is just a tick over 500 if it's making the same that it was before, which it should be. You know I'm looking for trouble when you see the draggy on. I don't know if I'm gonna get space to do any real runs, but I'm bringing it with me just in case, so we'll see what happens. All right, just getting on the freeway here, so we'll give her a little mini test hit. As you know, boys, everything I do is done in Mexico. In fact, just for the meme, off in the distance there, that is actually Mexico. Don't let all these fake YouTubers from the middle of the country tell you they be down by Mexico. They're lying to you. The funny thing is, I actually didn't mean to go all the way to the border. I think I passed my exit while I was racing that Mustang. We're gonna make our way back to a little spot where I think I might be able to get a little 60 to 130 off, but we'll see, we'll see. I'm still speechless. Like, people ask me if I'm gonna just add more power, like, is more power the next step? No, it's not. If I want more power, I need a bigger chassis. As simple as that. Okay, let me break down a couple things here. First of all, starting with the Mustang race. And you can believe me or not, I don't really care. I'm just telling you things from my perspective. It sounded like I shifted twice in that race, but I actually only shifted once. The reason you heard the boost come on and then it went away and then came on again in the beginning is because I spun third gear so bad. I had to lift off and then get back into it again. And it was a really close race at that point. And then when I got into fourth, believe it or not, the Mustang was still on the throttle. The Miata is just that much faster in fourth gear. It's about 100 more horsepower, and then with traction, obviously. So it absolutely just leaves, but it's to be expected. Mustangs are like 450, 470 horsepower, and a lot heavier than a Miata, so obviously it's gonna pull, but it's always fun to surprise someone like that. The second pull, 60 to 130, I looked back at the data, 8.28 seconds, and I know the car can go faster than that. I felt a couple misfires, And what I figured out is I accidentally had, it's a long story, but I accidentally had an old ignition dwell table in there, and what was happening is it was just blowing out spark. So I just took the car out right now, a few minutes ago. I'm uploading this video tomorrow. It's 9 o'clock at night right now. I just took the car out with the proper ignition dwell table, no misfires, pulling hard as heck, and this is the 60 to 130 that the car just ran. .35 seconds, and that is proper for how much power it has. From what I can find online, Hellcat Red Eyes run in the low 7s typically. I've seen a couple in the high 6s, but it's hard to tell from draggy videos what the slope was without a screenshot of the actual results. C8 Z06 Corvettes run like high 7s stock. The new GT500s, which are like 760 horsepower, they run like very high 6s. So that gives you just an idea of what the Miata can do. The bad part is it freaking pressurized the cooling system again, and it blew water all over the windshield. So I know it's painful for me too. It kind of confirms what I've wanted to confirm, and that it's now on a freshly cut head, perfectly flat, properly torqued head studs, just a standard MLS gasket, and it was still able to push coolant or push combustion into the cooling system, and it overflowed the overflow tank. So my prognosis is that I'm just pushing my specific setup too hard in a certain way that's making it do that. And it's not necessarily 500 horsepower, because people have made double that on the BP platform. It's not that 500 is that hard to achieve or that hard to make somewhat reliable. It's just the fact that I've built that engine specifically for response. I'm running obnoxiously high compression ratio for a boosted engine, a ton of ignition timing, even though I'm on E85, a small, relatively speaking, turbocharger with a restrictive turbine housing, all this stuff to try to get the engine to make more horsepower off boost and get the turbo spool up faster. And then I'm spinning that turbo at its maximum rated RPM to try to force it to make 500 horsepower. And I think I'm just pushing the cylinder pressures too far for what the setup is. So realistically, I think I need to run maybe around 425 wheel horsepower, maybe 450 at the most, and it might be more reliable and hold together at that level. Kind of a bummer, because I think at that horsepower level, I'm not sure that it can run a 10-second pass. I'd love to see it happen, but I'm not willing to hurt that engine anymore to try to force it to do something that it can't do, because it's not really realistic. Who cares if it runs a 10 if it's hurting the engine? It's not replicatable, and I wouldn't recommend that anyone out there does it. So for now, the car is still running fine. I'm gonna drive it again tomorrow and check the overflow tank. It might be okay to just leave at a lower boost level, pulled a little bit of timing out of it, and I'm hoping it just holds together for a while, because I don't want to have to rebuild it again, or worst case, I got to do another head gasket. But anyways, thank you guys for anyone who actually stuck around through this excessively long rant. I just want to provide you guys with the maximum amount of detail that I can for what is happening with the build, and have you guys kind of understand that you shouldn't necessarily copy everything that I'm doing, and I want to be fully transparent in that I am pushing that motor very hard to see what fails next in order for someone else to create a setup based off of it that's more reliable, if that makes sense. So anyways, again, thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.